The conference room froze as Danielle Carter slowly stood up, her janitor's uniform stark against the sea of tailored executive suits. Blood thundered in her ears, and her breath caught in her throat. "Don't sign that $5 billion contract," she said, her voice ringing out more powerfully than anyone expected. Flashbulbs popped from outside, where reporters were eagerly waiting to witness this historic takeover. Andrew Monroe, the young, formidable CEO of Monroe Industries, looked up and locked eyes with her. His Mont Blanc pen hovered over the document as security officers closed in on Danielle. The futures of her and her little daughter, Ava, hung in the balance in what might be the greatest gamble of her life. Once a rising financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, she was now nothing more than an office cleaner, and she knew she had only 10 seconds before they dragged her out of the room. Then Andrew suddenly raised his hand, signaling them to stop. "Everyone out," he commanded, his tone decisive, his sharp gaze fixed on Danielle. "Except her." The vast boardroom of Monroe Industries crackled with a heady mix of tension and anticipation. Light from the ornate chandeliers gleamed off the polished mahogany table, illuminating the $5 billion contract laid out before Andrew Monroe, the ambitious young CEO. Seated at the head of the table, his expression was cool confidence. His keen eyes scanned the board members, who masked their anxiety behind polite smiles. This was more than just a deal. It was the defining moment in the company's history, a bold acquisition that could propel Monroe Industries to unprecedented heights or plunge it into catastrophic failure. In the hush that followed, Andrew lifted his gold-plated pen, ready to sign. Outside those glass doors, cameras and microphones waited. The pressure was suffocating. But just as the pen tip touched paper, the door burst open. All eyes snapped to the entrance. A young black woman in a simple janitor's uniform stood frozen in the doorway. Time itself seemed to stop. Everyone stared, bewildered by this unexpected intrusion. Andrew's gaze hardened from surprise to anger as he realized a lowly staff member had interrupted the most important signing of his career. Struggling to contain his fury, he asked in a low, authoritative voice, "What is the meaning of this? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Danielle Carter felt every eye on her. Her heart pounded, her fists trembled, her breath came in ragged gasps. But she refused to back down, not now, when thousands of innocent employees, her colleagues, were depending on her. She swallowed, stepped forward into the room, and steadied her voice. "I'm sorry, Mr. Monroe, but you cannot sign this contract." The silence shattered. Senior directors frowned and muttered in annoyance, while others motioned angrily for security. Andrew, however, remained calm, his gaze assessing her. "Who do you think you are, telling me what to do?" Danielle drew in a deep breath. In that moment, she was more than a janitor. She was a mother fighting for her daughter's future, the voice of thousands facing unemployment. "My name is Danielle Carter. I'm a cleaner for this company. But I was once a financial analyst, and I know the true nature of this deal. If you sign, thousands will lose their jobs, all to line the pockets of a few executives." The room exploded at her bold claim. One director rose, seething. "Who are you to interfere? Get out of here." Security moved in, but Andrew raised his hand again, silencing them. The room fell still. Andrew stood, expression unreadable, and walked toward Danielle. "You say you were a financial analyst? Fascinating. I'll give you 1 minute to explain why I should listen to a janitor who just crashed the biggest event in my company's history." Danielle nodded, locking eyes with him, the confidence of her Goldman Sachs days shining through. "I've analyzed deals like this. Tech vision is overvalued by at least 30%. The only way to reach the projected profits is by laying off thousands of loyal employees. If you sign, you'll destroy countless families' lives, mine and my daughter's among them." Andrew remained silent, his gaze unblinking as the board members held their breath. Finally, he spoke, cold and clear. "Everyone out. I want to speak with Miss Carter alone." Stunned, but compliant, the directors, assistants, and security filed out one by one, leaving Andrew and Danielle across the vast table, the unsigned contract still between them. As the door clicked shut, Andrew looked deep into her eyes, ice mixed with curiosity. "Now, Miss Carter, explain yourself. And pray you're right, because if you're not, I will make you pay for today's stunt." Danielle inhaled, knowing her life had just irrevocably changed. She nodded firmly, speaking with every ounce of sincerity and resolve she possessed. "I will prove it to you, Mr. Monroe, because this is more than business. It's the lives of thousands waiting on you." Outside, reporters still waited in anticipation, unaware that behind those closed doors, the destiny of thousands was being decided by a courageous janitor and the city's most powerful young CEO. The night before, long after the city had fallen asleep, Danielle was still quietly pushing her cleaning cart down the endless corridors of Monroe Industries. The quiet, empty halls at night felt more comfortable than the daytime, when she had to keep her head down and dodge the disdainful glances of those in their expensive suits. She paused just outside the large boardroom where, come morning, the $5 billion contract with TechVision would be signed. The door was cracked open, soft yellow light spilling out, telling her someone was still working late. Danielle frowned and decided to come back later to avoid disturbing them. But as she turned to push on, she heard a soft rustle, the snap of papers falling to the floor, followed by a frustrated sigh from inside. Danielle hesitated, then stepped closer, intending only to let whoever was inside know she hadn't missed a spot. She tapped lightly on the doorframe. "Excuse me, do you need any help?" Inside came a surprised, impatient voice. "Come in." When Danielle entered, she immediately recognized the frowning man before the scattered documents as James Bennett, the powerful CFO of Monroe Industries, the same one she'd seen in the press, always so cold and self-satisfied. Tonight, though, his face looked worn, his sharp eyes flickering with annoyance at the late interruption. "Pick up those papers on the floor," Bennett ordered curtly, not bothering to look up. Danielle nodded and bent to gather the white sheets on the cold tile. That's when her eyes caught the heading on a densely packed spreadsheet. TechVision Post-Acquisition Workforce Optimization Plan. A knot formed in her stomach as she read the list of thousands of names alongside cold figures. Contract termination, staff reductions, department closures. Her heart lurched when she spotted her own department code, marked in bright red. Cleaning Services, Chicago, 100% contract termination upon deal close. Her chest tightened. That was her team. Hundreds of diligent workers, entire families relying on those wages, about to be cast aside for corporate profit. "Are you done?" Bennett's harsh voice snapped her back. She forced a calm smile, though her heart pounded. "Yes, sir, almost." "Then hurry up, I don't pay you to stand around." His irritation spiked. In her flustered rush, one confidential sheet fluttered out of her hand and drifted to the floor. Bennett's gaze snapped to it, suspicion darkening his eyes as he strode forward. Danielle's breath caught. Acting on instinct, she scooped it up before he could reach it, striving to look composed. "It's nothing important, sir. Just a blank sheet," she lied softly, praying he'd let it drop. He hovered over her, scrutinizing her every move. Danielle held her breath, body tense. After an agonizing moment, Bennett stepped back, expression easing to cautious neutrality. "Fine, now get out, and don't touch anything on my desk again, understood?" "Yes, sir." "Sorry for the disturbance," she murmured, hurrying from the room. As the door clicked shut behind her, Danielle leaned against the hallway wall and took a deep breath to steady her racing heart. The memory of that spreadsheet burned in her mind. If the contract went through tomorrow, thousands would be abruptly cast aside, herself and her daughter Ava included. In the quiet darkness of that long corridor, Danielle Carter realized she faced the hardest choice of her life: stay silent to protect herself or speak out for the truth, and for everyone relying on her. She closed her eyes, worry etched on her small face, but determination shining through. From this moment on, her life, and Ava's, would never be the same. But she knew she couldn't look away. She had to do what was right, no matter the cost. That night, Danielle barely slept. She lay motionless in her cramped room, the weak glow from the old desk lamp casting solemn shadows on the peeling walls. In her mind, the image of that cold spreadsheet, its haunting red numbers, replayed on an endless loop. Those emotionless lines of text, deciding the fate of thousands of people, including her and her colleagues, as if they were nothing but lifeless figures. Danielle shifted slightly, her gaze falling on the small bed where Ava was sleeping soundly. The little girl's soft breaths and peaceful expression belied the turmoil her mother was enduring. Danielle was facing the hardest decision of her life. Her eyes stung with unshed tears as a wave of helplessness washed over her. As a mother, her greatest duty was to protect Ava, her precious daughter who battled severe diabetes every day, relying on daily insulin and expensive medical care. Beside Ava's bed stood a small table piled high with nearly empty insulin bottles, scraps of paper bearing doctor's appointment reminders, and mounting hospital bills. Danielle fought a daily battle against the harsh reality that she couldn't afford to lose her job, even for a moment. Yet now she realized there was no choice but to act. Two voices raged inside her. One, a primal urge to survive, urged her to stay silent, keep her head down, and accept her fate to shield Ava for now. The other, stronger and more resolute, demanded she stand up for what was right, for the thousands of families struggling just like hers to make ends meet. Rising, Danielle moved to the small window and peered down at the deserted street bathed in the pale glow of streetlights. Memories flooded back to her days as a rising financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, when she'd faced a similar crossroads: to remain silent and preserve her career, or speak out to defend the truth. Back then, she chose silence, and paid a steep price, losing her reputation, her career, and her happy life with her late husband. Tonight she stood at that same crossroads again. But this time, she knew that if she remained silent, she would never forgive herself. She closed her eyes, feeling the night's chill, but her mind was clear. "Forgive me, Ava," she whispered to her daughter in her heart. "But I have to do what's right. I can't let you grow up in a world where injustice always wins and truth is silenced." Dawn crept in through the window. Danielle steeled herself for the battle ahead, pulling on her janitor's uniform, not as a symbol of submission, but as a banner of her resolve. That morning, as she arrived at the gates of Monroe Industries, her heart pounded fiercely, yet she forced herself to walk in with confidence, chin high. In her hand, she clutched a complete list of every employee who would be affected, along with the documents she'd printed in the pre-dawn hours. Inside, reporters clustered outside the main boardroom, primed to capture the landmark moment Monroe Industries would ink a $5 billion deal. Danielle knew that in mere seconds, her action would shatter that solemn spectacle, making her the target of scorn, and perhaps worse. "Miss Carter, why are you here so early?" a familiar voice called. Danielle startled, heart thumping, when she recognized CFO James Bennett, unusually confident and cheerful today, no doubt eyeing his hefty bonus. "I just wanted to ensure everything is perfect, sir," she replied, hiding the documents pressed to her chest. Bennett's brow furrowed as suspicion flitted across his eyes. "Be careful, Carter. You know how important today is. Don't let there be any mistakes. We don't tolerate errors right now." She managed a weak smile and nodded, tension coiling in her chest. "Yes, sir." As Bennett turned away, Danielle exhaled, feeling the pressure tighten her ribs. But she allowed no doubt. Drawing in a steadying breath, she stepped into the boardroom, where the board members and CEO Andrew Monroe waited to sign away billions. In that defining moment, Danielle knew there was no turning back. Her life and Ava's would be forever altered, but she was ready. She moved forward and spoke, her voice firmer and more determined than ever. "Don't sign that $5 billion contract." And as Andrew Monroe's cold, astonished gaze fixed on her, Danielle understood. She had entered a battle whose outcome no one could predict. But deep in her soul, she knew she'd done the only thing she could. A heavy silence descended over the vast boardroom the moment Danielle made her bold declaration. For an instant, Andrew Monroe's cold eyes remained locked on her, as if trying to pierce through every secret she was determined to hide behind that resolute expression. The room, once solemn, now crackled with tension as everyone stared at the young CEO, waiting for his decisive reaction. Andrew slowly set his pen down on the table, a deliberate, authoritative gesture. He rose to his feet, gently straightened his jacket, then met Danielle's gaze with unreadable intensity. "Everyone, please leave," he said calmly, though his voice carried such power that the board members instantly rose and filed out without a word. James Bennett, the CFO, shot Danielle one last icy glance before exiting and slamming the door behind him. The echo of it sounded like a distant thunderclap in Danielle's chest, signaling that a tense showdown was about to unfold. The room felt empty now, with only Danielle and Andrew standing opposite each other across the wide table. Andrew leaned forward, hands braced on the tabletop, his glare steady but no longer angry. He spoke slowly, weighing each word. "Danielle Carter, I'll give you one chance to explain yourself. Speak clearly and understand this. If what you say isn't backed by proof, the consequences will be severe." Danielle drew a steadying breath, her heart racing. This was the most important moment of her life. Every word would determine her fate, her daughter's future, and that of thousands more. "Mr. Monroe," Danielle began, her voice unwavering, "last night while I was cleaning, I accidentally came across an internal memo about the TechVision acquisition. As a former financial analyst, I know how to read these numbers. TechVision is overvalued by at least 30%. The projected profits you've been shown rely almost entirely on massive layoffs, specifically terminating every member of the cleaning and maintenance staff, including me and thousands of my colleagues." Andrew listened without interrupting, his sharp eyes never leaving her, as if gauging the truth in her words. Danielle pressed on, her tone steely. "I understand you're the CEO, and your duty is to maximize returns. But are you sure you want to build profit by ruthlessly discarding thousands who've devoted years to this company? Are you certain this isn't a trap designed to exploit you and this corporation?" Andrew's eyes narrowed, and for a fleeting moment he seemed unsettled. Then his usual chill returned. "You say you were a financial analyst? I'll verify that later. Right now, what evidence do you have to support these claims?" Danielle was silent for a beat, then pulled a few printed pages of the confidential memo from her uniform pocket and laid them on the table, sliding them toward him with determination. "This is just a small portion of what I've retrieved. I'm prepared to share everything. Please review these documents before making your final decision." Andrew picked up the papers and scanned them quickly. Danielle watched his expression shift from skepticism to grave concern. On the last page, he frowned, a dangerous glint in his eye. He set the documents down and looked up at her, his voice softer but no less serious. "Do you realize that your actions tonight could cost you your job, or even land you in legal trouble?" Danielle nodded, her gaze steady. "I understand completely, but I cannot stay silent in the face of the truth. I've paid dearly for my silence in the past, and I refuse to let that happen again. Some things are more important than my personal safety, Mr. Monroe." Andrew regarded her in silence, a complex mix of thoughts behind his eyes. Finally, he straightened his tie and reclaimed his composed CEO demeanor. "I'm postponing today's signing, but I want you to bring me all of your evidence this evening, at my residence. If you can substantiate these claims, I'll reconsider the entire deal. If you're lying or fabricating, you will pay dearly for it." Relief washed over Danielle, though she knew the hardest part still lay ahead. She nodded, voice firm as ever. "I will, Mr. Monroe. You'll have the full truth." As she stepped out of the boardroom, Andrew's gaze followed her with an intensity that hinted at the storm brewing inside Monroe Industries, a storm that neither of them could yet predict. Night had just fallen, and the city lights spilled through the expansive, floor-to-ceiling windows of the sleek penthouse atop the central tower. Andrew stood gazing toward the distant horizon, awaiting the decisive meeting about to take place. He'd spent the entire day poring over the materials Danielle had provided. Though he hated to admit it, the details in her documents were deeply troubling, enough to make him reconsider the entire $5 billion Tech Vision acquisition. A soft chime sounded at the door, pulling Andrew back from his thoughts. He crossed the room and opened it. There stood Danielle, her face taut with tension, but her eyes blazing with determination. She wore an old coat and clutched her portfolio as if it were her most precious possession. Andrew stepped aside and nodded for her to enter. The luxurious penthouse interior almost overwhelmed Danielle's small, humble frame. He sensed her discomfort but offered no comment, simply motioning toward his desk, where a laptop and related files awaited. "You may begin whenever you're ready, Danielle," Andrews said quietly, his tone serious. Danielle took a deep breath, then pulled from her case a thick stack of pages filled with numbers, charts, and detailed analyses. She began presenting. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steadier and more authoritative with each sentence. "I've thoroughly reviewed Tech Vision's financials over the past 3 years. Their reported profits are inflated by sophisticated accounting tricks. R&D projects touted as breakthroughs are either worthless or indefinitely postponed. If Monroe Industries pays $5 billion, we'll hemorrhage cash and be forced into massive layoffs to cover the shortfall." Andrew studied each chart intently. Every figure Danielle cited was logical and hard to refute. A knot formed in his stomach as the truth emerged, yet he remained outwardly composed. "How are you so certain?" he asked, coldly, but with a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Because I used to do this work, Mr. Monroe," Danielle replied, meeting his gaze. "I know exactly how these schemes operate, and the damage they wreak. I don't want to see you repeat the mistakes I once made." Her words cut deep. As Andrew prepared to question her further, Danielle's phone in her uniform pocket buzzed violently, shattering the tense atmosphere. She startled, whipping the device out. Paleness washed over her face, and panic filled her eyes. "My daughter, Ava. She's running a high fever, and her diabetes is critical. The babysitter called. I don't know what to do." Andrew didn't hesitate. "Let's go. I'll take you home right now." Surprised by his swift decision but too alarmed to question it, Danielle gathered her papers and followed him out. Moments later, they were speeding through the city in Andrew's luxury car, headed for Danielle's modest apartment. Throughout the drive, Danielle sat beside him, frantically calling for updates on Ava's condition. Andrew focused on the road, but his mind raced. It was the first time in years he'd felt the weighty human cost behind a purely financial decision. They arrived at Danielle's building in minutes. Inside, little Ava lay on her bed, flushed and weak. The babysitter hovered anxiously. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately," Andrew declared, turning to Danielle. "I'm driving. No time to lose." Grateful and bewildered, Danielle nodded. In minutes, they were en route to the nearest ER, Danielle cradling Ava in the back seat. As the city lights blurred by, Andrew felt something stir in his hardened heart. He'd grown accustomed to billion-dollar deals and tense boardroom showdowns, but never to seeing the real human fallout of his decisions. In that moment, he realized a truth he'd long ignored. Behind every number, every contract, there were real people who bore the consequences, and from now on, he couldn't turn away from that reality. The car pulled up at the hospital entrance, and Danielle hurriedly scooped Ava into her arms and dashed inside, her steps frantic but determined. Andrew followed close behind, unaware that, for the first time in his life, he was entering a world utterly unknown, a place where people fought every minute just to stay alive. As the nurses rushed Ava into the emergency room, Danielle stood at the threshold, her eyes full of worry and helplessness. Andrew hovered beside her, unsure what more he could do but bear witness to this heartbreaking scene. This wasn't a business deal, nor figures on a spreadsheet. It was real life, harsh and merciless. After several agonizing minutes, Danielle and Andrew sat on a bench in the chilly hallway. The silence was eerie, broken only by the frantic beating of their hearts. Andrew turned to Danielle, and in that moment he saw the strength carved into her face, tinged with a deep, hidden pain. "Danielle," Andrew said softly, breaking the heavy quiet between them, "I need to know why someone as talented as you has had to endure all of this. Why did you leave your career as a financial analyst for the work you're doing now?" Danielle fell silent for a moment, a flicker of old anguish in her eyes, as if Andrew had touched an unhealed wound. She looked at him steadily, sorrow and resolve mingling in her gaze. "I was a senior financial analyst at Goldman Sachs," she began, her voice low but firm. "I specialized in mergers and acquisitions. I had everything society calls success: status, prestige, a happy family. But it all collapsed overnight because I refused to do something I knew was wrong." Andrew listened intently, feeling the weight of her confession. For the first time, he didn't see a subordinate or a rival. He saw a real person, wounded yet remarkably resilient. Danielle continued, her voice trembling but resolute. "My firm was advising a major corporation on a merger. The financial projections they presented were entirely fabricated, inflated with shady accounting tricks. I discovered the fraud and chose to speak up. But my superiors, people I respected, pressed me to stay silent. They promised me everything if I signed off on the bogus analysis. If I refused, they vowed to destroy me." She paused, pain flashing in her eyes. Andrew felt a lump in his throat. He'd made tough choices before, but never paid such a price. "I refused," Danielle said, voice cracking. "I couldn't betray myself or thousands of others, but they kept their word. Overnight, they sullied my reputation and pushed me out of finance with false allegations. Soon after, my husband died in an accident I still blame myself for. I spiraled into despair, and the only thing that kept me going was my daughter, Ava." She met Andrew's gaze, tears brimming, but her stance unbroken. "Now, I can't let the same thing happen again. I won't stand by while innocent people lose their livelihoods and their futures for the gain of a few powerful individuals. Mr. Monroe, I was wrong to stay silent once. This time, I will fight to the very end." Andrew was silent, struck to the core by her words. His entire career revolved around profit margins and quarterly returns, but in that cold hospital corridor he felt the emptiness of it all. He realized he'd blindly trusted James Bennett, who spun seductive financial narratives over the warning signs, all in the name of profit. Turning to Danielle, Andrew's eyes shone with rare sincerity and determination. "I'm sorry, Danielle. I used to think business was just about maximizing profit. But now I understand that every decision I make affects real lives." Danielle looked at him, surprise and cautious hope flickering across her face. For the first time since they met, she sensed that change might truly be possible. "I will re-examine the entire Tech Vision deal," Andrew continued, his voice steady. "I promise to address these concerns fully." At that moment, the ER door swung open and a doctor emerged, his expression serious but relieved. "Miss Carter, your daughter is stable now. She'll need observation, but she's going to be okay." Danielle exhaled, tears slipping down her cheeks. Andrew rose and gently rested a hand on her shoulder, offering comfort and solidarity. In that instant, they both understood their lives had taken a new turn. From that day forward, Andrew knew he could never go back to who he once was. His responsibility to thousands of employees and to Danielle and Ava had become a part of his conscience and his life. The dawn's first light broke through the hospital window as Danielle gently held Ava's small hand, watching her drift into a deep, exhausted sleep after the long night. Andrew had left moments earlier, leaving Danielle alone with her tumultuous thoughts and the fragile hope she'd just begun to feel. Yet, unbeknownst to her, in the darkened depths of Monroe Industries headquarters, a sinister plot was already unfolding, one designed to snuff out every sliver of hope she'd found. At the very top floor of the Monroe building, CFO James Bennett sat in his private office, rage burning in his eyes as he stared at his computer screen. Danielle's stolen documents from the previous night had tripped Monroe's alarm systems, revealing exactly what she'd done. Bennett knew how devastating it would be if Andrew Monroe saw the full truth. The $5 billion Tech Vision takeover he'd meticulously orchestrated for months would crumble. Clenching his fist, Bennett's face hardened with cruelty. Danielle would pay, and she would pay in the harshest way possible, so no one else would dare defy him. He picked up the phone and dialed the security chief without hesitation. "I need to report a data theft," he said in a chillingly calm voice. "The suspect is Danielle Carter, a cleaning staff member. I have solid proof. Dispatch the police immediately." That very morning, as Danielle prepared to wheel Ava's cradle out of the hospital, a pang of unease shot through her. She glanced down the corridor and saw two uniformed officers striding purposefully toward Ava's room, their expressions grim. Her heart froze when one stepped forward and asked in a firm tone, "You're Danielle Carter?" Danielle's voice trembled as she nodded. "Yes? What's wrong?" "We have a warrant for your arrest," the officer said, producing cuffs. "You're accused of stealing confidential data from Monroe Industries. Please come with us." Danielle felt her limbs go numb and her breath catch in her throat. Ava looked up at her, wide-eyed and panicked as the officers approached. "Mama, what's happening?" Ava sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clutched the officer's sleeve. "Please don't take my mom. She didn't do anything wrong. She's good." Despair ripped through Danielle's heart. She knelt, wrapping Ava in her arms, fighting back tears. "I'm okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'll be right back, I promise." But the cold metal of the handcuffs snapped shut around her wrists, and Ava's cries echoed down the corridor. Doctors and nurses looked on helplessly as Danielle was led away, Ava's tearful gaze following her, an agonizing testament to Bennett's ruthless revenge. On the ride to the precinct, Danielle felt her world collapse. Bennett's accusations were so perfectly framed that she stood no chance to defend herself. Though she'd long known the cruelty of high finance, she'd never imagined becoming its direct victim. At the police station, they shoved her into a stark interrogation room, fluorescent lights harsh on her face. The door slammed shut behind her, plunging her into cold isolation. Detective Lawson entered, dropping a heavy file on the table. "We have concrete evidence from CFO James Bennett of Monroe Industries," he said bluntly. "He's provided documents proving you stole confidential data. This is a serious crime, Ms. Carter." Danielle fought to keep her voice steady. "I didn't steal anything. I was trying to protect my co-workers. I'm telling you the truth." The detective's face remained impassive. "That's for the court to decide. For now, we have grounds to hold you." Meanwhile, back in his office at Monroe Industries, Bennett lounged in his leather chair with a satisfied smirk. He knew Andrew Monroe wouldn't let this pass, but he'd prepared for every eventuality. Danielle was the perfect sacrificial pawn to save his $5 billion deal. "Don't blame me, Danielle," he murmured, raising a glass of whiskey. "You were merely a necessary loss to protect my plan." Elsewhere, Andrew Monroe received the call about Danielle's arrest. His eyes widened in a mix of shock and fury. He realized instantly that this was Bennett's dark retaliation, a cruel scheme to crush anyone who dared challenge him. Snapping to his feet, Andrew's heart burned with righteous anger. He knew he could no longer stay silent or stand by. It was time to act, not just for Danielle, but to uphold his own conscience and integrity. The battle between truth and power had begun in earnest, and Andrew was determined that this time he would stand squarely on the side of truth, no matter the cost. The moment Andrew received word of Danielle's arrest, he sprang into action without hesitation. He knew that if he didn't move immediately, Danielle would be crushed beneath Bennett's ruthless power play and sinister schemes. A fierce sense of responsibility stirred within Andrew. After years of focusing solely on profit, he finally understood that he must protect someone simply because it was the right thing to do. He quickly called William Harris's office, one of the city's most renowned criminal defense attorneys, famed for turning hopeless cases around. "Mr. Harris, I need you on this case right away," Andrew said, voice firmer than ever. "Get Danielle Carter released on bail today and be ready to marshal evidence proving her innocence." Hanging up, Andrew felt his heart pound. Not with fear, but with a powerful resolve. He was going to confront James Bennett himself. Over the next hours, Andrew quietly launched a thorough internal probe at Monroe Industries. Using his CEO access, he combed every financial file related to the TechVision deal, determined not to overlook a single detail. Night fell, but Andrew's office remained lit as he pored over spreadsheets and exchanged emails between Bennett and keyboard members. The deeper he delved, the clearer the intricate web of fraud Bennett had woven, manipulating TechVision's valuation, cooking the books with forged financials, and privately plotting with supposed allies to silence any dissenters. Danielle was only the latest casualty. Staring at the irrefutable proof on his screen, Andrew felt anger and disappointment surge through him. He realized he'd trusted Bennett and neglected the very company his father had built, simply because he'd bought into the promise of profit. Clutching the evidence, Andrew prepared to act decisively, but before he could, his phone rang. "Mr. Monroe," William Harris's confident voice said, "I've secured Miss Carter's release from custody. You need to present your evidence quickly. Bennett's plan is perfectly crafted to frame her." "I understand," Andrew replied calmly, grateful for Harris's prompt response. He immediately left the office and drove to Danielle's modest apartment. Inside, he found her sitting beside Ava, who was finally sleeping after a day of tears and terror. Danielle looked up at Andrew with pain and relief in her eyes. "I'm sorry to drag you into this, Mr. Monroe," she said, voice trembling. Andrew shook his head gently, sincerity in his gaze. "You're not at fault, Danielle. I'm the one who should apologize for letting this happen. But I promise you, I will do everything in my power to bring the truth to light." Danielle managed a weary smile, a spark of hope igniting in her eyes. "Why are you doing this? You could easily look the other way and move on with your life." Andrew was silent for a moment, gaze distant yet resolute. "Because I can't live with a guilty conscience any longer. I used to think business was all about maximizing profit at any cost, but now I see that behind every decision are real people, families, innocent children like Ava. I won't build my future on their pain and loss." Danielle breathed easier, feeling an invisible weight lift from her shoulders. She asked softly, "What will you do next?" Andrew met her eyes, voice firm and determined. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting. I will publicly disclose all the evidence of Bennett's fraud and the complicity of those involved. I will accept any consequence, even stepping down as CEO, if that's what it takes. But I refuse to let them continue deceiving us." Danielle looked at Andrew, newfound respect shining in her gaze. He had once embodied the cold, detached face of corporate power. Now he stood before her, courageously fighting for justice and integrity. In that moment, both understood the battle ahead would be fierce and unforgiving. Yet, seeing the unwavering determination in each other's eyes, they knew they were no longer alone. They had found an ally and discovered the true courage within themselves. That morning, the atmosphere in Monroe Industries' boardroom was unusually tense. Slanted sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, yet it did nothing to soften the cold, serious expressions on the directors' faces. Andrew sat at the head of the table, a thick dossier of evidence spread out before him, proof he had painstakingly uncovered over the past several days. Across from him, James Bennett glared back, his face impassive, yet his eyes revealing a flicker of anxiety. A man normally brimming with arrogance and confidence, now teetering on the edge of losing control. Seated beside Bennett was Chairman Richard Harlow, a sharp-witted, middle-aged gentleman who maintained a polite exterior, but had quietly supported Bennett's ruthless plans from the start. Andrew opened the meeting in a firm, unwavering tone. "Today, I've convened the board to address serious misconduct related to the TechVision acquisition. I have uncovered grave irregularities in the way CFO James Bennett and Chairman Harlow have been handling this deal." Murmurs rippled around the room, but Andrew pressed on, tossing the dossier onto the table. "I possess conclusive evidence that CFO James Bennett deliberately manipulated our financial reports to inflate TechVision's valuation. More disturbingly, he conspired with certain board members to silence dissent, most notably by orchestrating the wrongful arrest of Danielle Carter, the courageous employee who exposed this fraud." Bennett shot to his feet, fury and panic warring in his voice. "These are baseless accusations. I've served this company for over 10 years. I would never betray its interests." Andrew met him coolly, eyes locked on Bennett. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Bennett, but these allegations are anything but unfounded. They're documented in internal emails between you and Chairman Harlow. You've abused your power to conceal the truth, even at the cost of destroying careers and lives." Chairman Harlow remained silent, expression unreadable, yet eyes narrowing dangerously. After a tense pause, he spoke in an ice-cold voice. "Andrew, do you realize what you're doing? You're accusing the very people who stood with your father to build this company from the ground up. Are you certain you want to take on us?" Andrew didn't flinch. "I have no desire for conflict, but I cannot remain silent in the face of the truth. My father did not found Monroe Industries so it could be exploited by opportunists. If you truly respect his legacy, you would not betray the values he instilled." His words struck at Bennett's and Harlow's pride. Bennett's glare softened to a menacing sneer as he hissed, "You'll regret this, Andrew. You, and that Danielle, will pay dearly for your foolishness." The meeting ended in chaos as heated arguments broke out. Andrew immediately left to update Danielle, but the moment he stepped into her apartment, he found her face pale and terrified. "What is it, Danielle?" he asked urgently. Her trembling hand handed him a single sheet of paper she'd just received. A few chilling lines were all it took to make Andrew's blood run cold. "If you don't want to see your daughter harmed, stop everything at once." Danielle's hand shook violently, tears brimming in her eyes. "They know where Ava is, Andrew. They'll do anything to stop us." Andrew gripped Danielle's hand, resolve blazing in his gaze. "I promise you, Danielle, no one will harm Ava. We will not back down to threats." He immediately called in professional security, arranging round-the-clock protection for Danielle's apartment and Ava's school. Yet Andrew knew this was no longer just about defending a few individuals. This was a fight against the greed and cruelty of the very people he once called friends and colleagues. That night, Andrew didn't sleep. He stayed up reviewing every piece of evidence, preparing for the fierce battle he knew lay ahead. Fear had given way to iron-clad determination in his heart. He gazed at the framed photograph of his father on his desk and vowed this was the moment he would prove himself worthy of his legacy. Not only to protect Danielle and thousands of loyal employees, but to stand for his own conscience and the values he believed in. The next morning, before leaving the apartment, Andrew looked at Danielle with absolute sincerity. "We're facing dangerous opponents, Danielle, but I won't stop, and I won't let anyone hurt you or Ava. We will get through this, together." Danielle offered him a small, weary smile, and in her eyes Andrew saw for the first time a steadfast belief. No matter how difficult the fight ahead, courage and truth would be their greatest weapons. That morning, the sky was oddly overcast, as if sharing in the tension gripping Monroe Industries. Major and minor shareholders alike filed into the main boardroom, their expressions wary and anxious amid the swirling rumors of internal turmoil. Andrew stood by the expansive window, gazing down at the city below, his mind racing with the heavy responsibility he was about to shoulder. He drew a deep breath, feeling the full weight of the decision he was poised to announce. Today would change everything. For himself, for Danielle and Ava, and for the thousands of innocent employees counting on a just outcome. As he entered the room, the steely stares of Bennett and Chairman Harlow locked onto him, challenging, menacing. But Andrew remained unflinching. For the first time, he realized he no longer feared any force, because he was now fighting for his conscience and the truth. Andrew took his seat at the head of the table and calmly swept his gaze across the tense faces of the shareholders waiting expectantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began in a measured, resolute tone, "I know many of you came today expecting an announcement on the $5 billion Tech Vision acquisition. I'm sorry to inform you that this deal will not proceed." A stunned roar erupted throughout the chamber. Shocked and disappointed eyes turned toward him. Chairman Harlow immediately rose, his voice cold and authoritative. "Andrew, do you understand the consequences of this decision? This deal is vital to the company's future." Andrew met Harlow's gaze without wavering. "Precisely because I understand the magnitude of this choice, I must stop it. I have irrefutable evidence showing not only serious financial fraud in this transaction, but also that thousands of our employees would lose their jobs the moment this contract is signed." Bennett sprang to his feet, fury and venom in his voice. "You're lying, Andrew. You have no proof of any wrongdoing." At that moment, the boardroom door burst open, and Danielle strode in, dossier in hand. Her eyes blazed with determination as her voice rang out across the room. "Mr. Bennett, I have all the evidence you thought you'd destroyed. I once worked as a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, and I know exactly what you've done." She stepped up beside Andrew, opened her dossier, and laid out the documents. "Fellow shareholders, here is clear proof that CFO James Bennett and Chairman Harlow conspired to falsify our financial reports, artificially inflating TechVision's valuation by at least 30%, and planned massive layoffs to cover up those illusory profits. I stand before you today not for personal gain, but because I believe we all deserve the truth." The room fell deathly silent, all eyes fixed on the incontrovertible evidence now displayed. Bennett's face drained of color, his hands clenching in impotent rage. For the first time, Harlow's composed facade slipped, his eyes betraying sheer unease. An elderly shareholder rose, voice grave. "Andrew, if all this is true, it's the gravest betrayal our company has ever seen. What do you propose we do?" Andrew stood, his expression solemn and voice strong. "I will take full responsibility for this decision. To protect our company and our people, I will resign as CEO immediately. But before that, I demand the board commission an independent, thorough investigation into the misconduct of Mr. Bennett and Mr. Harlow. Now is the time to choose ethics over greed." Bennett's voice trembled with rage as he protested. "You can't do this. Andrew, you're destroying everything your father built." Andrew fixed him with a steely glare. "The ones destroying this company aren't me, Bennett. They're you and your accomplices. I believe my father would be prouder of today's decision than any billion-dollar deal I could sign." The boardroom sank into stunned silence. Danielle, standing beside Andrew, looked at him with profound respect. He was no longer just the cold, powerful CEO she'd known. He had risked everything to defend the truth and to protect workers like her and Ava. When the meeting adjourned amid turmoil and tension, Andrew and Danielle left the boardroom together. But as they stepped into the hallway, Danielle's phone buzzed with an ominous text. "You'll regret what you just did. Your daughter will never be safe again." Danielle froze, her skin going cold. Andrew gripped her shoulder, his eyes unwavering. I promise you, Danielle, that will never happen. Trust me." She looked up at him, fear still in her eyes but now mingled with absolute confidence in this man by her side. They both knew the road ahead would be perilous, but they also knew that courage and truth were the greatest weapons they wielded, and they would face whatever came, together. The late afternoon sun slanted through the expansive windows of the CEO's office, casting mottled bands of light across the now nearly empty desk. Andrew quietly gathered the last of his belongings, a heavy weight in his chest as he prepared to leave behind what had once been the greatest pride of his life. The CEO's chair, once the pinnacle of his success, was now just a memory. Strangely, he felt no regret, only an unexpected sense of peace. As Andrew stepped out of the office one final time, he saw Danielle waiting in the hallway. Her eyes held quiet understanding and fierce determination, telling him that they had chosen the right path, however rocky. "You okay, Andrew?" she asked softly, sincerity shining in her gaze. Andrew offered a small, calm smile. "Better than I've ever been. I think, for the first time in years, I really know who I am and what I want to pursue." Danielle nodded, concern flickering in her eyes. "The board just informed me I won't be able to return to work either. Bennett did everything he could to ruin my reputation." Andrew looked at her, admiration plain on his face. "I'm so sorry you were dragged into this, Danielle, but I also believe we did the right thing." She returned his smile, her voice strong and unwavering. "Andrew, I've never regretted our decision. It may be hard now, but I believe that from truth and courage we will always find a new way forward." In that moment, they both realized they had nothing left to lose, only a fierce faith in the values they had fought for. Andrew's eyes lit up with renewed energy as he spoke. "Danielle, we don't need Monroe Industries to make a difference. We can build it ourselves. A new company with a clear mission to serve people, not just chase profit." Surprise and excitement broke across her face. "You really think so?" Andrew nodded, hope sparkling in his eyes. "Absolutely. With your financial expertise and my management experience, we can create a socially responsible business that supports honest companies and thousands of workers." Danielle's eyes brightened with enthusiasm for the first time in days. "We'll call it Phoenix Capital, a symbol of rising from the ashes. We'll prove that ethics and business can go hand in hand." They shared a look that felt like a brand new beginning, promising, yet full of challenges. They knew the road ahead would be tough, but armed with the lessons they'd learned, they were more ready than ever. Over the next days, Andrew and Danielle worked tirelessly to lay Phoenix Capital's foundation. They spent hours planning, seeking out overlooked but principled businesses that chose ethical practices over quick returns. Of course, Bennett and Chairman Harlow didn't let them go unchallenged. Anonymous threats and frightening messages kept arriving, sometimes shaking Danielle as she worried for Ava's safety. But Andrew always reassured her. "They're trying to scare us into stopping, but I'll never let anyone hurt you or Ava. Trust me." Meanwhile, the scandals Andrew and Danielle had exposed forced authorities to investigate Bennett and Harlow's serious fraud allegations. Despite Bennett's fierce counterattacks, his carefully woven web of deception began to collapse under mounting legal and public pressure. After several tense weeks, Phoenix Capital was officially launched. On opening day, in their small but welcoming office, Andrew and Danielle stood together before a loyal group of friends and colleagues, people who had left Monroe Industries to join their new, principled venture. Andrew looked at Danielle, pride and gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you, Danielle. I couldn't have done this without you." She smiled brightly. "No, thank you. You helped me find myself again after years of fear and hiding." At that moment, Ava ran up and threw her arms around them, her innocent smile a poignant reminder of why they had done it all. "I'm so proud of you, Mom and Mr. Andrew," she whispered, her eyes sparkling with joy and hope. Andrew and Danielle exchanged a glance, knowing with absolute certainty that, no matter the cost, their decision to stand for what was right had been the best one. From that day forward, Phoenix Capital wasn't just a new company. It was a powerful symbol of rebirth rooted in the ethical values they had defended to the end. Standing in that small office, Andrew and Danielle understood that their journey was only just beginning. And this time they feared nothing, because they were guided by their hearts and their consciences. Time passed, and the fierce storms of those early days finally subsided, giving way to a calmer, more hopeful rhythm of life. Phoenix Capital steadily forged its place in the market, not through flashy suspect deals, but thanks to sound decisions and a genuine commitment to social responsibility. Under Andrew's leadership and Danielle's sharp financial acumen, the firm quickly attracted clients eager to build sustainable, community-minded businesses. Most importantly, they were able to save hundreds of employees, people who had once faced layoffs under the TechVision deal, restoring hope and stability to countless families. Every morning, when Andrew arrived at the office, he felt true joy in the faces of those who had endured despair. Now they worked diligently and loyally, not out of fear of losing their jobs, but because they believed their work created real value. Meanwhile, Phoenix Capital thrived, and Monroe Industries sank deeper into crisis. The clear evidence that Andrew and Danielle had revealed forced Bennett and Harlow to step down in disgrace. Government investigations laid bare the dark schemes they'd spent years hiding. Monroe Industries' name became synonymous with scandal, and only sweeping reforms could begin to restore its reputation. But Andrew and Danielle no longer cared about Bennett's or Harlow's downfall. Their lives now focused on a future filled with meaningful goals. The bond between Andrew, Danielle, and Ava grew ever stronger. After those turbulent months, Andrew became an indispensable part of their little family. Simple dinners in Danielle's small apartment became a warm routine. Talks about Ava's school day and future plans brought daily delight that Andrew had never known as CEO. One weekend afternoon, sunlight streamed across their tiny balcony as Ava excitedly recounted earning an A on her first math test. Danielle beamed, tears of pride glistening in her eyes. Andrew sat beside them, his heart filled with warmth, a feeling he'd never experienced in the boardroom. "See, Mom, I told you math wasn't hard," Ava said, eyes shining with confidence. Danielle gently smoothed her daughter's hair and smiled. "That's right, sweetie, you did great, but you also have to thank Mr. Andrew. He showed you a really clear way to solve those problems, didn't he?" Ava nodded eagerly and threw her arms around Andrew's arm. "Thanks, Mr. Andrew. I never thought math could be so fun." Andrew laughed, a gentle warmth spreading through him. "No, thank you, Ava. You've taught me so much more than math." Danielle watched them, tenderness softening her gaze. In that moment, she realized Andrew was no longer just a colleague or friend. He had truly become part of her and Ava's lives, a cherished member of their small family. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they prepared a simple dinner in the tiny kitchen. Ava's laughter mingled with Andrew's and Danielle's playful banter. In that humble space, none of them remembered the tense meetings, Bennett's dark plots, or the board's bitter betrayals. All that remained was safety, trust, and the genuine affection that grew stronger each day. Late that night, after Ava was sound asleep, Danielle and Andrew sat together on the balcony, gazing up at the stars. Andrew broke the comfortable silence softly. "Danielle, I never imagined I could find this. A real family." She smiled warmly, her voice gentle but sincere. "Me neither, Andrew. After everything we've been through, I thought I couldn't trust anyone again. But now I see I was wrong." Andrew looked deeply into her eyes, more tender and earnest than ever. "I want us to build this future together, Danielle. Not just as business partners, but as a real family. I want to be there for you and Ava always." Danielle paused, her eyes glistening with tears, then smiled brightly and nodded. "I want that too, Andrew. I believe we'll create a loving, strong family together." In that moment, they both understood this was not an ending, but the start of a brand new chapter, one they would write with faith, sincerity, and the moral values they'd fought so hard to defend. From that day on, they truly became a family. Not because of legal ties or social obligations, but because of the love and trust they shared. Their days together would still bring challenges, but Andrew, Danielle, and Ava knew that as long as they had each other, they would find the strength to overcome whatever came their way. And for Phoenix Capital, it was more than just a company. It stood as a powerful testament to their courage and conviction. A clear reminder that no matter what happens, if you stand by what's right and trust in your values, you can always rise from the ashes and build a brighter, more meaningful future. 6 months have passed since Phoenix Capital's founding, and every day now stands as living proof of the right choice Danielle and I made. What began as a small, humble office has blossomed into a vibrant workspace where integrity and ethics come first. Step by step, we've become a beacon of transparency and responsibility in the financial world. I sat in my office, looking out the large window at the cityscape below, which now felt entirely different. Gone were the glamorous lights of detached power. In their place shone sparks of hope. Hundreds of rescued employees, healthy, growing businesses, and most precious of all, the little family Danielle, Ava, and I have built together. Danielle entered carrying a file, her face brighter than I'd ever seen. "We just signed a major new client," she announced. "They want to expand their green business platform. Andrew, this is the fruit of our perseverance." I smiled, pride and tenderness in my eyes. "No, Danielle. This is the result of your courage. You taught me that true success isn't measured by numbers or big deals, but by the positive impact we have on our communities and on families." She sat beside me, her gaze soft and full of confidence. "But you're the one who made it all possible. You showed me it's never too late to choose again, to stand for what's right." In that moment, we both understood that after all we'd endured, our feelings for each other had become an integral part of our lives. We weren't just business partners anymore, we were true companions on life's journey. Just then, the office door burst open and Ava dashed in, clutching a drawing she'd just finished, her eyes aglow with pride. "Mom, Mr. Andrew, I finished our family portrait." Danielle and I exchanged smiles as Ava handed us the drawing. It was simple but meaningful, the three of us holding hands beneath a bright blue sky, surrounded by colorful flowers. Danielle's eyes welled with tears, but this time they were tears of pure joy. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Danielle said, voice catching. "This is the best picture I've ever seen." I gently put my hand on Ava's shoulder, looking at her with affection. "Ava, I'm so happy you see me as part of your family. I promise I'll always be here to protect and love you both." Ava beamed and threw her arms around us, her laughter filling the room, an uplifting reminder of the bright future we were building together. Meanwhile, The legal probe into Bennett and Harlow's wrongdoing had concluded. They were held accountable for their fraud and deceit, forced to step down in shame. Footage of them leaving the courthouse, heads bowed and avoiding the cameras, sent a clear, powerful message. Success built on lies cannot endure. News of their downfall spread quickly, reinforcing our clients' and partners' trust in Phoenix Capital. Danielle and I became symbols of honesty, bravery, and an unwavering commitment to ethical values. One weekend evening, Danielle and I sat on our small balcony under a blanket of twinkling stars. Ava was sound asleep after a fun day with family. I turned to Danielle, my gaze more earnest and heartfelt than ever before. "Danielle, there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time but haven't had the courage to say." She looked at me with curiosity and trust. "What is it, Andrew?" I gently took her hand, my eyes warm with affection. "I love you, Danielle. I used to think I needed nothing more than success, but now I know that you and Ava are the most precious gifts I've ever received. I want to spend my life protecting and loving you both." Danielle was silent for a moment, her heart racing. Then she smiled tenderly and nodded. "I love you too, Andrew. I never thought I'd trust in love again, but you showed me that real happiness still exists, if we're brave enough to seek it." We looked at each other, our eyes reflecting deep, genuine happiness. Happiness forged through hardship, through the courage to stand for what's right, and through the love we share. Our journey shows that true success isn't measured in billion-dollar contracts, but in bravery, honesty, and the enduring strength of family. In life, we will face incredibly difficult choices, but what matters most is whether we have the courage to choose with our hearts and defend our values. What about you? If you were in Danielle and my shoes, would you have the courage to stand up for what's right, even if it meant risking everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel so we can keep bringing you stories of inspiration and meaning. Thank you for your support. We'll see you in the next video.